Imagine stepping back, way back, over 12,000 years, not just into a world of, basic survival, but into a world where identity, cultural expression, well, they were already really deeply ingrained. Today, we're taking a deep dive into an absolutely extraordinary discovery. It significantly rewrites the timeline for one of the most, I guess, striking forms of body modification ever known. Our mission here is to pull out the really key nuggets of knowledge from a fascinating new study. We're going to unpack the evidence of Europe's earliest known intentional cranial modification. We want to give you a shortcut to understanding how scientists pieced this ancient puzzle together, what it tells us about human culture back then, and maybe why it still resonates. You're about to get well informed, maybe hit with some surprising facts, definitely some aha moments.
Yeah, and the source material for this deep dive, it's a really compelling study, just published in Scientific Reports. It was led by a team from the University of Florence, and their work details this amazing find. An individual from Italy's, well, famous Arini Candide cave. So get ready. We're exploring this intersection of, ancient rituals, really cutting-edge technology, and what it actually means to shape identity across thousands of years.
Okay, so let's get into it. At the heart of this story is an individual they call AC12, a late Upper Paleolithic individual whose elongated skull was found in the Arene Candide cave. That's on the Ligurian coast, northwestern Italy.
Right. And what's just, well, truly remarkable is the age of AC-12. Radiocarbon dating puts this individual somewhere around 12,620 to 12,190 years ago. This isn't just old. It makes AC-12 the oldest documented case of what we call artificial cranial modification, or ACM, the oldest ever found in Europe.
Wow, the oldest in Europe. That really pushes things back, doesn't it?
It pushes previous timelines
Yeah.
back significantly, yeah. And think about the context, too. This person lived during the Younger Dryas cooling event, a time of pretty dramatic climate change.
Right, a tough time to be around.
Exactly. So imagine surviving through that kind of environmental upheaval, but still dedicating, significant effort to something so culturally specific, like reshaping a child's skull. It really speaks volumes about the enduring power of identity, even when things are so uncertain.
That really does underscore the depth of their cultural commitment. It wasn't just survival, it was about belonging, identity. So tell us more about how they actually did this. What exactly is artificial cranial modification?
Okay, so artificial cranial modification, ACM, it's the deliberate application of pressure, usually to an infant's head, during those really early developmental stages, before the skull bones fully fuse together. And this permanently reshapes the cranium. And the fact that it's a permanent skeletal marker, that's what makes discoveries like this so incredibly valuable for archaeologists.
Because it sticks around, unlike, say, clothing or even tattoos sometimes.
Precisely. Unlike maybe temporary adornments or even something like Ötzi the Iceman's tattoos, which need skin preservation, a reshaped skull leaves no doubt. It's evidence of a practice that lasted beyond one person's life.
So were there different ways they did this, different techniques for modifying the skull?
Yes. Broadly speaking, the study talks about two main types. First, there's tabular modification. That's usually done with rigid objects, like wooden boards. It tends to flatten the front and back areas, maybe broaden the sides. Then there's the second type, and this is actually what we see with AC-12. It's called circumferential or annular modification.
Circumangular, okay.
Yeah, annular. This is achieved using softer tools, maybe like tightly bound cloth or bandages. And the result is more of an overall elongation of the neurocranium, the main part of the skull. So AC-12's very distinct shape points directly towards that annular type of modification.
Fascinating. Okay. But how do you solve what's essentially a 12,000-year-old cold case? How do you prove this was intentional modification when all you have are, well, bones? Especially fragile, ancient bones. You mentioned earlier interpretations were debated, right? Some thought maybe it was just a medical condition.
Exactly. And overcoming those debates, that wasn't easy. It took some pretty extraordinary ingenuity. The University of Florence team, they basically brought the latest digital forensic toolkit to this ancient mystery. They used what's called virtual anthropology.
Virtual anthropology.
It involved things like CT scanning the fragments, very careful manual segmentation, separating the pieces digitally, and then multiple independent virtual reconstructions of the AC-12 cranium. Doing it multiple times independently was crucial. It ensured reliability, reduced any researcher bias creeping in.
Okay, so they built these incredibly detailed digital models. Then what? How did they analyze them?
Well, then they used a really sophisticated statistical technique called geometric morphometrics. Imagine digitally mapping thousands of tiny points all over the skull's surface. capturing its entire 3D shape. Not just basic length or width, but every curve, every angle.
Gotcha. Super precise.
Extremely precise. It gave them this incredibly objective, detailed way to compare AC-12's skull shape to, well, lots of others.
And what did they compare it against? I imagine they needed a really solid basis for comparison to be sure.
Oh, absolutely. The comparative analysis was comprehensive. They compared AC-12 against unmodified skulls from people living in Italy around the same time, late Upper Paleolithic, but also Mesolithic and Neolithic periods. They also compared it to individuals known to have pathological cranial conditions. Things like craniosynostosis, that's where the skull bones fuse together too early, which can naturally change the head shape.
Right, so they had to rule that out definitively.
Critically important, yes. To prove AC-12's shape wasn't just some medical abnormality, and crucially, they included a global sample set. Skulls from individuals around the world with confirmed cases of artificial cranial modification, both tabular and annular types.
Okay, so using these advanced methods, they could almost like bring these ancient bones back to life digitally. What did the results show? Did they finally settle the debate?
They really did, unequivocally. The statistical evidence just consistently pointed to ACM. For instance, they used principal component analysis, that's a way to find the major patterns in complex shape data, and AC-12 consistently clustered, grouped together, with the known annular type ACM group. It was clearly distinct from both the unmodified skulls and the pathological ones.
So the shape pattern just matched the modified group.
Exactly. Then they used other advanced stats like multinomial logistic regression. Think of it as creating a statistical fingerprint for different skull shapes. The results were just undeniable. AC-12's unique shape consistently got classified only with other known modified skulls. It stood completely apart from natural variations or pathologies.
And the accuracy was high.
Incredibly high. Depending on the specific data set they used in the comparison, the accuracy in classifying AC-12 as ACM was between 93% and, well, basically 100%.
Wow, okay. That's about as close to certain as you can get with this kind of ancient evidence.
It's extremely strong evidence, yes. It effectively puts those lingering debates to rest. The specific way AC-12's skull was elongated and flattened, particularly in the back, the occipital region.
Fair.
It just didn't match any known pathologies like craniosynostosis. And that unique occipital shape also ruled out unintentional changes. Things like maybe how the infant was carried or slept, or even using tump lines, those headbands for carrying loads. The shape just didn't fit those scenarios.
So this level of certainty, it really lets us read so much more into these bones, doesn't it? Transforms them from just relics into, I don't know, almost messages.
That's a great way to put it. Direct, intimate messages from past cultures about their identity, their beliefs.
Okay, so we've established the science is solid. This was definitely deliberate modification. Which brings us to the really big question, the so what? Why? What does this actually tell us about who these people were, about their society?
Exactly. This is where we get into the deeper meaning. This practice, ACM, it isn't just, a style choice like changing your hair. This is what anthropologists sometimes call body culturalization. It's a powerful, permanent commitment. It physically embeds communal values, identity right onto the individual, often from birth. It creates this kind of living legacy, connecting generations.
And it's fascinating that while this is Europe's earliest confirmed case, the practice itself seems much older and more widespread, right?
Absolutely. This isn't some isolated European thing. ACM has incredibly deep Paleolithic roots globally. There are other really early examples outside Europe. For instance, northeastern China has evidence going back around 11,250 years, and even earlier in southern Australia, possibly around 13,000 years ago. So AC-12 fits into this much larger, ancient picture of human behavior.
Now, you mentioned something earlier I want to go back to. Ascribed versus acquired identity. That sounds really important here.
It's a crucial takeaway, yes. Think about it. ACM is applied in infancy. The baby has no say in it. It requires significant sustained effort from the caregivers, the community. So it represents an ascribed identity, a status, a sense of belonging that's essentially given or imposed at birth by the older generation.
Like a birthright, almost.
Sort of, yeah. It suggests this really powerful, maybe non-negotiable transmission of cultural values. It links generations in a very fundamental physical way.
And the place where AC-12 was found, the Urine Candide Cave, adds even more context, doesn't it? You said it's a major burial site.
It really does. Urine Candide is one of Europe's largest late Upper Paleolithic mortuary sites. We know of at least 22 individuals buried there, spanning that tough Younger Dryas period. And the location itself is probably significant. It's a cave set high up on this very visible 90-meter white sand dune.
So a landmark.
Likely a powerful landmark, yeah. It probably reinforced social connections, maybe signified privileged access to the surrounding area, its resources, a real focal point for their world.
And AC-12's burial within this significant place was unusual, you said.
Very unusual. The fascinating detail is that AC-12's cranium, modified skull, was intentionally placed directly on top of another burial. This other individual is known as AC-15, sometimes called the Tomb of the Antlers. But only AC-12's skull was placed there. The rest of AC-12's skeleton, the postcranial elements, were found nearby in a separate cluster.
So they moved the skull specifically. Wow. Any other details about AC-15, the person underneath?
Interestingly, yes. AC-15, the Tomb of the Antlers, showed signs of a chronic bone condition called hypertrophic osteoarthropathy. Just adds this layer. A community dealing with chronic illness even while engaging in these really complex mortuary rituals.
It paints such a vivid picture.
It really does. And this complex behavior, rearranging older bones, especially skulls like AC-12's, placing them with newer burials, it points to this profound ritual connection, a connection between ancestors, the recently deceased, and the living community. It really signals this multi-generational transmission of values, of identity, a community deeply connected through how they treated their dead.
Okay, this is crucial, though. We see head shaping in later cultures sometimes linked to status, to hierarchy, right? Like the Inca or Maya. But should we assume the same thing here, 12,000 years ago with hunter-gatherers? Does AC-12 mean they had strict social classes?
That's a really important point for critical thinking. And the answer is not necessarily. While ACM is sometimes linked to hereditary hierarchy in those later, more complex range societies, finding it here in a late Upper Paleolithic hunter-gatherer context, well, it doesn't automatically equate to a strictly hierarchical society.
So what might it mean instead?
It's perhaps more indicative of marking an exceptional individual, or maybe marking someone as belonging to a specific subgroup within the larger community. It suggests what we might call horizontal differentiation. So distinctions based on things like age or sex, maybe special skills, unique life events, rather than rigid vertical social classes.
Okay, so different, but not necessarily higher or lower rank.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the fact that AC-12 is the only one out of 5 reasonably intact crania found at Owain Candide from that period, showing this modification, that reinforces the idea. It seems like it was a specific signal, maybe for a subgroup or a particular role, not something everyone in the community did.
So we can infer this idea of an ascribed identity, a powerful cultural marker applied from birth. But the precise social role, the specific meaning of AC-12's modified head within that group, that remains a bit of a mystery.
It does. It's a tantalizing mystery, absolutely. We're still piecing together that part of the puzzle.
Okay, so let's recap. We've journeyed back over 12,000 years into the Owain Candide cave. We've seen the earliest confirmed evidence of intentional cranial modification, skull shaping in Europe. It's just such a vivid reminder, isn't it, that our Ice Age ancestors, they weren't just surviving. They were complex people, driven by sophisticated cultural beliefs, a profound sense of identity, much like us, really.
Absolutely. And this deep dive, it really reveals how ancient humans physically embodied their culture, their identity, etched it right onto themselves. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it, about all the other forms of body culturalization that might have existed way back then, things that just left little or no trace in the archaeological record.
That's a fascinating thought, and it brings us to today, too. What does this ancient practice, this permanent ascribed modification, what does it tell us, maybe, about our own contemporary expressions of identity? From tattoos and piercings, maybe even to fashion, lifestyle choices. How do our personal choices reflect the deeper values we inherit or the ones we choose to adopt? And how might our bodies, our choices today, be read as living artifacts by people thousands of years from now? Something to think about.